rationalizing failure to protect yourself. When something goes wrong, your mind reacts instantly. Not by asking what actually happened, but by asking how to protect the image you have of yourself. The first instinct is not truth. It is defense. Instead of facing a mistake directly, the mind starts creating explanations. The timing was bad. The conditions were unfair. The rules were unclear. Someone else interfered. These explanations sound logical. They feel reasonable and often contain a piece of the truth. But their real purpose is not accuracy. Their purpose is protection. Rationalization keeps your identity intact. It moves failure outside of you. It turns mistakes into external problems. Problems you could not fully control. This process is automatic. You usually do not notice it happening. The mind prefers a version of the story where you remain capable, competent, intelligent. Someone who simply faced bad circumstances. Admitting a mistake feels dangerous to the ego. It feels like a crack in how you see yourself. So the ego wraps failure in logic that softens the impact. Over time, this becomes a habit. Mistakes are explained instead of examined. Lessons are postponed and growth slows quietly. The ego feels safe, but progress pays the price. Selective comparison to maintain self-worth. Comparison happens constantly. You compare yourself to others without trying, at work, online, in everyday conversations. But the ego decides how those comparisons are framed. When confidence is strong, comparison often goes upward. You look at people ahead of you, people doing better, achieving more. In those moments, comparison feels motivating. It creates ambition and direction. But when confidence is fragile, comparison changes direction. It quietly flips downward. You compare yourself to people struggling more, people behind and making worse choices. This restores balance. It protects self-worth. Your mind highlights your strengths, and it downplays your weaknesses. When someone outperforms you, the ego explains it away. They had connections. They were lucky. They had advantages you did not. When someone underperforms, the ego uses it as proof. Proof that you are doing fine, that you are ahead. Neutral comparison is rare because neutral comparison reveals reality. Reality does not protect you. So the mind quietly edits the comparison, not out of malice but out of self-preservation. Rewriting the past to defend your identity. Memory feels solid. It feels accurate and trustworthy, but memory is flexible. Your mind constantly reshapes past events to protect who you believe you are. Failures become necessary lessons. Bad decisions become reasonable choices given the situation. Missed opportunities become things that were never that important. You remember your intentions clearly. You remember what you meant to do, but outcomes fade faster. Effort becomes the focus. Results become secondary. This protects the ego from regret, from embarrassment, from shame. Over time, the past becomes smoother, kinder, more flattering. It slowly shifts closer to the version of yourself you prefer, not the version that actually existed. This makes honest self-reflection difficult, because the record has already been edited. The ego prefers a comforting history, even if that comfort comes at the cost of learning. Rejecting information that threatens identity. When information challenges your beliefs, your reaction is emotional first, not logical. Data that threatens your self-image feels unsafe. It feels like an attack. So the ego activates defenses immediately. You question the source, you doubt the motives. You look for flaws before understanding the message. At the same time, confirming information feels effortless. It feels obvious, feels true without scrutiny. This has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with identity. Beliefs are tied to who you think you are. Changing them feels like losing stability, like losing ground. So the mind resists, automatically, aggressively. The ego values consistency more than accuracy. Because consistency feels safe, even when it is wrong. Redirecting blame away from the self. When outcomes are negative, blame moves outward. Towards circumstances. Other people. Timing. This keeps self-esteem intact. When outcomes are positive, credit moves inward. Skill, effort, intelligence. This imbalance happens naturally. Without planning, without awareness. The ego avoids responsibility for failure, but eagerly claims ownership of success. Over time, this creates a distorted self-image. Strengths feel exaggerated. Weaknesses feel distant. True growth requires accountability. The ego resists it. Because accountability threatens comfort, And comfort is what the ego exists to protect, avoiding situations that expose weakness. The ego dislikes exposure, especially public exposure. So the mind quietly steers you away from situations where failure is possible, not because they are dangerous, but because they threaten image. You delay starting. You wait for perfect conditions. You over-prepare endlessly. Comfort is framed as being practical. Avoidance is framed as being patient. But underneath, the motivation is protection. Protection from judgment, embarrassment, uncertainty. Potential feels safer when it remains untested. The ego stays intact, but ability remains unknown. Building narratives that create a sense of superiority. Superiority stabilizes the ego. It creates distance. Your mind builds quiet stories where you are more aware, more thoughtful, disciplined. Others are careless, uninformed, short-sighted. These narratives feel justified. They feel logical. But their function is not truth. It is protection. Feeling superior reduces vulnerability. It shields against doubt. The ego prefers hierarchy because equality invites comparison, and comparison invites threat. So the mind subtly places you above others, even when the evidence is weak and the difference is imagined. Confusing intent with impact. Intent feels personal. Impact feels external. When harm occurs, the mind focuses on intent. I did not mean to. That was not my goal. This separates identity from consequence. It protects the ego from guilt. But impact exists, regardless of intent. Results matter even when intentions were good. The ego struggles to accept this, because accepting impact feels like admitting flaw. So the mind reframes, minimizes, deflects. Growth requires holding intent and impact at the same time. The ego prefers intent alone, resisting fully owning mistakes through apologies. Apologies feel risky. They imply fault, weakness, so the ego softens them. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry if it came across wrong. These phrases sound polite, but they reduce responsibility. They protect self-image. A full apology requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels unsafe. Admitting wrong feels like losing status, even though it often builds trust. So the mind avoids full ownership to preserve control, to preserve pride, treating being wrong as a threat to worth. At the deepest level, ego protection is driven by fear. The fear that being wrong reduces value. So the mind fights error aggressively, even small ones. Being wrong feels personal. It feels like a flaw in identity. This creates defensiveness, rigidity, resistance to correction. But being wrong is not identity. It is information. The ego struggles to separate the two. Growth requires comfort with error. The ego prefers certainty, even false certainty. Your mind protects your ego constantly. Not because it is harmful, but because it is trying to keep you stable. These mechanisms preserve identity. But they also limit growth. Awareness weakens their control, slowly, consistently. If this video helped you see your mind more clearly, like the video to support the channel. And comment other topics you want to see next.